Let's start with a couple new stickers from friends across the pond in the UK from the Knackler's Workshop. I'm very excited. We'll take one of these stickers and add it to my board. Hi, and welcome to part 2 of this quick tool review. I had so many things to cover that I couldn't put it all in one video. The first video was mostly the variable, well, entirely the variable frequency drive because there was so much to cover on that. So I thought I'd break it up into 2 parts because it was getting long. It was already 20-some minutes, and that sort of, I make that sort of the limit of my videos. I used to do some that were a lot longer, but people don't really have the patience to watch, it seems, 45, 50-minute videos. They will just watch 8 to 12 minutes, and that's it, and they dump off. And maybe that's because the content's not consistently interesting. I never know what people actually like. Some people like watching chips get cut. Some people just want to see, the idea of what you're building and then jump straight to the finished product. And, it's hard to please everybody, but I try. And I don't mind people jumping around because then you get to see the parts you like. So hopefully there's enough to keep you busy. Over here, I have some pin gauges. I bought a large lot of pin gauges on eBay. It was like 20 bucks for just this big bag, and there were mostly pin gauges in there, and I got rid of most of them, but I kept some interesting ones. So they actually used pin vices that they wedged into the aluminum handles they made, and the pin gauges, you just tighten down and hold the pins in there. But there was another type of design they did for really small pins that I thought was really fascinating, and I didn't keep one. I wish I had to show you an example. But what they did was, instead of buying one of these probably fairly expensive pin gauge heads, they made a split brass bushing that had the inside cut out to the diameter of the pin, slightly smaller, I'm guessing, or slightly larger. And then they wedged that brass piece into the aluminum handle they made. And I thought that was a really creative solution, because if you just picture pushing a pin like this, you're going to bend it into a piece of aluminum that you have an interference fit on. That would be really tough. So instead, they made a brass piece that fit around it and then just pushed the brass piece in. So I thought that was kind of neat. It was a great way to find a bunch of thread gauges, including some sizes that I'll probably never use. Let's see, what is this one? This one is 832, so I'll definitely use that one. But there was like one that's like 848, and there's some other weird ones. But it was a pretty good way to get a lot of pin gauges at one time. This one's 440, and I'll definitely use that. So this has got a go gauge for 440. Now, I don't usually do work that requires gauges, but often I'll just reach into my drawer and grab a cheap, inexpensive store-bought nut, like Lowe's kind of thing if I'm doing 1/4-20. And you never know how accurate those are. And if you really care about your threads being, moderately accurate, that's probably not good enough. So sometimes I'll probably want to use the thread gauges. You could go to McMaster-Carr and buy some higher grade nuts, and they'd probably turn out to be better. But anyways, enough of that. I know Tom Lipton, I think he's Tom Lipton. He has like a collection of nuts that he bought from McMaster-Carr of high quality on a rope that he can quickly grab and check threads. And maybe that's a good choice too. Because these certainly, if you went to buy these, are way too expensive to buy in any normal situation. It's probably more than 20 bucks a piece. Next up, in the last project I did, I don't know if I've even posted the video yet, but I did a bunch of parts, and I found my 5C Collets. They were some really inexpensive Chinese ones. They were really poor. Among other things, they didn't open up far enough, and so I compared it to my hard-hinge ones that I bought off eBay used, and the hard-hinge ones were just better all the way around. And I don't know if I had some run out on them, but I was looking for a better set. So I didn't jump all the way to buying a name brand like Hardinge or Royal or one of those really good brands where everyone would be good, because they're $20-some per collet. And they probably should cost that when they're being that careful, especially if they're made in the United States or some country where wages are high. But All Industrial decided to put themselves behind another brand called Colton, and I'm not sure whether it's theirs or not. It's still made in China, but they're saying this is their premium 5C Collet, so I thought I'd give them a test, because I think this set was $80-some for 16 pieces, which is really inexpensive. Maybe I'm just sticking my foot in it again, but we'll run over to the lathe and pop this in my Atlas chuck and see. Also the threads, especially on the cheaper ones I had, the inside threads for putting collet stop were all jacked up. And I couldn't put the collet stop all the way, threaded all the way in, because the threads weren't any good on the inside. And the threads on the outside of some of them aren't so great either. So we'll check out that on these and see how good they are. But first, let's take a look at a couple other items I was able to get on eBay relatively inexpensively that I was kind of excited about, that I'd never be able to afford if I had to buy them new. But when you get them on eBay and someone doesn't sell them for what they're actually worth, you can luck out. Next up is gauge block holders. So these things will hold a traditional stack of gauge blocks. It's a nice set because not only does it have a threaded shaft that lets you lightly adjust these, fine adjust, but it has a quick release too, so you can quickly pull the whole arm out. You grab both and you can just slide it out really quickly. So you build a stack of gauge blocks, and they've got various sizes of those gauge block stack holders, and then you either put one of these small ends on, which have some half round or flat on one side for the hat, or you can put a pointed if you want to do that. So you can build yourself a stack of gauge blocks. The foam is totally deteriorated on the top and it keeps dropping on the stuff in here. But you could put these arms out there, and what you might use them for, one of the things, is if you have a dial bore gauge and you want to set the dial bore gauge to a specific size to compare against, well, you need a stack of gauge blocks to do that. And I've had the bore gauge for a long time, but I never had a way to easily build a stack of gauge blocks. Now I do, and that really solves the problem for me. So that was a good find. Again, I think this is a TTC, and I think Travers still sells it, and I think it's like $400 or $500 at least. So it was a great find. It also has something, I'm not quite sure what this guy's for. It looks like it's for sliding on the surface plate, but I'm not quite sure how it works. And there were no instructions with this, so I need to find out a little more about this guy. But it was a good find, and I got it mostly for these because I do know I want to use those. Next up was another really good eBay find, and this is Pratt & Whitney set of Hoke gauge blocks, except it's the set of really long ones. They go all the way up to 20-inch length down to 6, or 5 rather. And you might ask why I'd get a set like this, because how often do you really need really long gauge blocks? Well, for the price I got them for, it was worth having, because one thing I wanted to test was how accurate is the DRO on my mill, for example. And so I could use these gauge blocks as known references to go a known distance and see if the DRO is reading, with an indicator, which I intend to do in a future video. So I've been curious for a long time how accurate it is. Now I can test it. And I got a really good deal on these, and they're in great shape. So I was very excited to get them. All right, so let's open up these guys. Wow, okay, they came individually packaged and wrapped, which is not unusual. The other set I got of 5C Collets, they came individual tubes and wrapped in plastic, covered in oil as appropriate. So the question with these is going to be how accurate are they? How good are the threads on these things? Because I had a serious problem with the threads before. Let's see if we can get one that's a really common size, like 1/2 inch. So individually separated, 5/16. This is a set by 16ths. They have larger and smaller sets than this. They have an 8 set and a complete 5C collet set. So let's see how the 1/2 inch is. This is a very common size to use, and I have a 1/2 inch pin that I can go and pop this in the lathe and see how good it is. So they have laser marking on the side for Colton. That's nice, and definitely good oil covering. They did chamfer the sides of this entry point, and it looks like it's open more than the typical 5C. Let me show you what I'm comparing against. So here's my existing 5C set, and when I got these, the inside, you can still see all the crap in there. I took a toothbrush, a stainless steel brush in there, and tried to clean it out, but the threads are really crappy. Already I can say the threads look a lot better on this one than they do on this one. I think you can probably see the difference as well. The threads are really rough on this, with all kinds of metal shavings from the cutting process still left there. That's even after cleaning with a wire brush, which is pretty amazing. So this looks good in and out. This one was full of manufacturing debris. This is the one I had before, full of manufacturing debris on the inside, and it took a long time, and still has some, to clean it out. So let's head over to the lathe and pop this guy in and see what we can see there with accuracy. Let's start with the collet stop. This is my Edge Technologies collet stop, and it's made out of aluminum. And the threads were cut nicely on this. The threads were not cut so nicely on my collet itself, and as a result, it wanted to make its own threads, so I couldn't even thread this in safely. I think I got like only the first 2 threads in and it was tight. So let's try this guy with the threads, and it went in smoothly and perfectly right off the bat. So that's an amazing sign right there, because I definitely couldn't do this. It stopped hard, like a couple threads in. This one's nice. Okay, let's try it in. This is a brand new Atlas 5C collet chuck. I got it, I don't know, a while ago. You probably saw that. It's only been used like a dozen times or so, so no wear on the threads. So the other one, getting the thread started was hard. I had to push, and it kept wanting to miss. This one, thread started immediately. I didn't really have to push. Let's just see. So I just set it, and look, it grabbed right off the bat. The other one, I have to constantly push and hope that the first thread will catch to get it to go in. So this looks good. That's tightening nicely. All right, so let me grab a 1/2 inch pin and an indicator and see what kind of runout we got. All right, so I have some unknowns here. The pin I've got here, it's a reference pin, but I don't know how perfectly round it is, so I'm just guessing. The Atlas chuck claims, I think, something like 1/2 thousandth repeatability. They claim 1/2 thousandth. What I'm seeing here is just about 1/1000th, just under 1/1000th of runout. This is a tenths indicator, and I am seeing approximately 9/10ths of runout. So not what they claim, but I don't know where the fault is. I cleaned everything carefully because, you know, when you're talking about this kind of level, everything needs to be perfectly clean. I don't know if the pin is perfectly cylindrical to begin with. I don't know if the Atlas chuck is perfect. It's what I'm guessing it is. These could be out by that much, but they claim not. So what I guess I could try is another 5C collet and see how it performs and compare it to it. Let's do that next. This is a 3/8 collet, and it went in every bit as easily as the last one. Threads are great. So that's the same. That's about 1/1000th run out for this guy. Let's compare it to one of the inexpensive collets. Or I guess I should phrase that, less expensive collets. So here's the unfortunate collet. And see, it wouldn't start on its own. I had to push it to get it to start. Oh, well, that's 1.5 thousandths run out. So certainly better than those other collets. Check out this. This is the bore in the Atlas. That's about 1/1000th all by itself. So I think those 5C collets are not at fault, because the Atlas chuck itself has run out in the bore. So there you go. I guess it also could end up back at the mount. The way it's mounted, it could be slightly out as well. That's another possibility I need to look at that. Although this whole thing was a Atlas 5C D16 mount kit, but maybe where it's mounted, there's a little bit of dirt or something on there, and that's causing it to run out. But it is run, so I don't think it's the 5C collet's fault. So maybe both sets of collets are about as accurate. But I've got to give Colton, All Industrial's Colton brand, a huge thumbs up, because the fit and finish is a lot better. The threads on the inside and outside are far superior, as well as the front, the bore on the front, and the laser marking is much easier to read. This cheapo set, it's so hard to read their laser marking that I ended up taking a scribe and putting my own 1/2 inch mark because I couldn't read it. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up for the price, $80 some for a set of 16. Better than the ones I had, so if you're looking for an inexpensive set, I think that's where you should go. Next up is something I got to solve a problem. When I solved one problem, I created another one. So you notice I've got lots of lights around. This shop, I've got lights stacked everywhere. Normally I don't shoot them, but I've got all these lights because that makes it easier for me to shoot content down here. But what that ended up doing was making this Sino really hard to see. And I have two of these Sino readouts. Both of my machines I purchased with DROs, and Acro, where I bought these, put the Sino DROs on. And to be honest, they've been bulletproof. I mean, they've got really funky manuals, but they work, and they just plain work. So I don't really have any complaints about them. But the displays are kind of dim. So I thought about modifying displays. They're usually multiplexed, and you either can change the frequency, how often these are updated, or you can change the amount of current going to them and make them a little brighter. And I thought about doing that, and I also thought about maybe putting a shade over them, which also would work. But then I ran across another part that was being sold in one of the Asian markets, and I picked up a Sino-made LCD backlit display that should be a direct drop-in. So let's take a look at that. So this guy came packed pretty well. You could buy this kit in 3 forms. It comes in just the DRO and its mounting hardware for the DRO itself, or you can buy it with scales, and you can get it in 2 and 3 scale based units. Comes with an AC plug. Looks like they packed it very nicely. And it comes with the typical mounting hardware, which I will not need because I am just going to swap it 1 for 1 if it works. Let's see, what is this guy? Oh, that's part of the mounting hardware. That's a cast aluminum or cast steel. It's kind of heavy. I think it's cast steel bracket. That's surprising. And with the hollow steel shaft here. And then what I really wanted was the DRO itself, and it came with a manual. This is supposedly a Sino original as well. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I don't think they were expecting me to read this manual. Not without some help. Okay, let's pop this guy open. So Sino DROs are really popular here in the States. I know that I've seen a lot of guys whose other sites, I watch a lot of YouTube myself, and a lot of the other guys have Sino DROs also. So I know that they're pretty common. Apparently that's Acra's go-to. Of course, I guess you never know if it's a genuine Sino, because someone might be trying to rip off the people that copied them to begin with. But yeah, because look, it's got a genuine QC certificate. I've never seen one of these fake before. But, you know, it could be. I'm hoping it's real. I don't honestly know, but we'll just power it up and see what it looks like. It should be almost identical to the other DROs, just they have a different display, which you will see, which should be much easier to read. And I'm going to go to Sino's site and check it out. So one of the advantages of this backlit type is they tend to be a lot brighter. So again, I bought this sight unseen, but I have another one that I put on my surface grinder, and it was much brighter. Oh yeah. Okay, English. Oh shoot. You got to catch it when it's booting up quickly there. All right, let's try that again. There we go. Wow. Okay, that's very nice. Look at those displays. That is really easily readable. Good angle of view. That is great for an LCD display. They sure have gotten good. So this is going to be really easy to read. So we're going to have to set this guy up, and I'm going to have to go first, download the manual for this, and then I'll pop it over on my milling machine, which is where I intended this. And if I liked it, then I was going to get another one for my lathe, because this is only a little over $100. I think it was $129. Also took about 2.5, 3 weeks to get here, which is still very reasonable. I wonder, nope. Yeah, they store tools in this one just like the other one. Universal coordinates. Bolt circle. Oh, look at that. That's nice. So rather than just enter the values, now you can actually see what they want, and it'll show you. That's great. Took my old Sino display off, and first thing I noticed when I took it off is that it's a lot heavier than the new one, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Also, the plastic feels better, which makes me wonder if the new Sino is a Chinese company ripping off another Chinese company, and this is a fake Sino, which it might be. So the first thing I did was I popped my indicator on the quill and did some really small movements up to like 25 thousandths. and it was right on the money. So that was a good start. Then next, I put a dial indicator with 2-inch travel on here, set it to 0, and set my DRO to 0. And then I went and I cranked on my x-axis really quickly until I got to 1 inch, crept up on 1 inch, and it was off by a little bit. I thought, well, that's really weird. Okay. And let me go back to 0 and come back, shoot past, and then come right back up. Oops. Take out the lash, and there's pretty close. All right, let's try this again. Now, if I move the x-axis very slowly so I don't crank on the wheel very quickly, and I creep up on the value, we're about 1/1000th off, potentially. And in that case, I don't know if it's the dial indicator or this. Not entirely certain about that. However, let's do this one more time. Creep up on 0 here. Re-zero this guy. And let me whip through this like I would normally if I was moving a long distance. Oh, and we're going to go 1.5 inches now since I already overshot 1. I got a little overzealous there, and creep up on it. Now it's actually doing better. So a couple times, I was actually off by 0.006, like it was not reading the scales properly. That has me a little bit concerned that the read rate of this guy can't keep up with fast motion, although it did there. It's only off by 1/1000th, and it could be this guy that's off by the 1/1000th. I maybe not dead perpendicular to the vice axis. There's a whole bunch of possibilities for that, so I'm not going to worry about that quite yet because I'm not sure my my test setup is that accurate. But the first couple times I was actually off by 0.006, which now that I got it on camera, it's not repeating, and that has me a little concerned. So I'm going to repeat this test a few more times and probably try it with the other axes as well and see what happens. I have concerns about, see, and then when you come back, that 1/1000th you were off shows back up here, and you can, it's actually like it was accidentally recording some extra points along the way, and it added up to 1/1000th. So that's really weird because I was at 1.5 inches, I was off by 1.1 thousandths, and that's what I was back here too. Let me try one more time. This time we'll come up at 1. And look at that. Well, I'm not sure what to make of this, to be honest with you. The first few times I did this over and over, it was off by a lot, 0.006 in an inch, which is not something I would be excited about. Again, I've never done the same test with the Sino. It came pre-set up from me from the factory. All right, let's try a medium speed. Coming up on 1/1000th. I'm a little bit over there, and there's my 1.4 thousandths. I didn't get 0.4 here. And now it's 1/1000th. So I'm really not sure what to make of that. I love the display. You can see even in this really bright environment, it's very easily readable, but this is much thinner plastic, and the buttons are not quite as tactile as the Sino, and nothing about it was the original Sino. I'm not sure if this is a real one. It has the laser printed marking on the back, but the Chinese are very good. The Chinese companies are very good at duplicating other companies' products, and I don't know if this is an example of that or not. I'll probably leave it on here a little bit and play with it, but I'd say proceed with caution, and if you're doing precision work, you might want to buy a guaranteed known brand that you can be sure is doing exactly what you want it to do. I might pop my other Sino back on here and test the exact same thing over again. All right, let's repeat the same test with the Sino. So I've zeroed that. I've zeroed this, although it looks like it's drifted a little bit. So let me and overshot. Not that a few tenths is going to matter, because the milling machine is not really the environment for tenths, as I understand. I don't know if you could ever actually make that work. Okay, re-zero that, and let's go at a medium pace. Oops, overshot. Medium pace for 1 inch. And that one's 4/10. That's pretty good, well within the realm of possibility. Let's keep going for 1.5. Oh, I nailed it. And that one's 2/10. Let's go back to 0 very fast. Oops, overshot and come back. And 1/2 thousandth. This one gives me a little more confidence, I gotta say, that my original Sino seems to be responding a bit better. I mean, 1/2 thousandth is nothing, especially since these scales are 50 micron scale or 5 micron scales. Oh, look at that, it came right back to 0. And just for the heck of it, 5 micron is 0.005 millimeters. 25.4 divided by means that that scale reads in 2/10 increments, 0.00019 inches per increment. So the 2/10 increments for those scales. So you're definitely going to need plus or minus 2/10 accuracy. Let's try one more time, and let's head out at a slower pace just for the heck of it. Heading to 1. No hurry, and creep up on it. And 6/10. And let's go to a full 2 inches. And look at that. Okay, I think this one wins. I'm not trusting the other one so much because I got anywhere between 1 and 6 thousandths off, and I'm not sure what was causing it, because my setup hasn't changed at all. Just a big heavy steel plate sitting on the y-axis ways, and this guy here, and I wasn't bumping it, so I'm really not sure what's going on there. But now there's another possibility here that I haven't considered. There's a scale compensation factor you can put in these guys, and this the new Sino unit is no different. Oh, look at that. Pretty darn good. I think I'm going to stick with this Sino unit for now until I can do some more tests on the other one. The other one's got a beautiful display, and it's really bright. This one I struggle to see a bit. As you can see on camera, it's a little bit hard to see. But there is a compensation factor. Oh, that's where I was going with this. I'm really sorry about that. So what I'm saying is I think I'm going to stick with this Sino. Now, what it could be is on the other Sino, there's a scale compensation factor you can put in, and you can actually make it so it reads exactly right by compensating the scale, or very, very close to exactly right, by putting a compensation function in there, and they let you put in values. My problem right now is I only have the manual in Chinese. The vendor is going to send it to me in English, but until I do, I don't think I'm going to trust it in a normal real-world position, use case here. This one is kind of impressing me that it's very repeatable and reasonable, so I'm going to go with that. I guess what I'll say is always proceed with caution when you're getting the inexpensive metrology equipment from Asia. To be honest, I can't really afford easily, $2,000 for a name brand DRO system, which is why I got these to begin with, like a Newell or a Sony or a Mitutoyo. There's a ton of them out there, but they're really expensive, a couple grand plus per system. So I opted for these, and I know what I'm risking with these. The Sinos have been really good to me over the years, and again, when I bought this Acra it came from the when I bought it from them. This is an Acra approved DRO, meaning they support this one. They will give you other ones if you're willing to pay extra, but this was fairly expensive. I think it was like a $500 option plus installation. Anyways, take it for a grain of salt. I think I might have learned a little bit here. So for now, this guy's going to stay off in a holding pattern until I get the new manual, and then we'll do some more tests. Next up are some Carbide milling cutters that I got. I've got a specific use for these. This is a 2-flute Carbide milling cutter, and it is absolutely razor sharp, 90-degree angle. They have them in a variety of angles. The quality looks excellent. Ultimately, time will tell. These were like $7 a piece for 1/4 inch, which is not a ton cheaper than you can get some in the US here for, but still cheaper. And I buy them specifically just to try them out. This is a single flute one, solid carbide, 90-degree as well. And I intend to grind the end of this a little bit flat. I have a specific use for it. Now I could have made one of these myself, but I was just kind of curious because I think these, I forget the price, but I think these were even cheaper still. I think these were like $3 a piece or something like that, or $4 a piece. So I thought, what the heck, I'll try them out and see how they work. Because you can't lose. Heck, the Carbide blank would cost me almost that much or more. So that was just a couple more items there. They were fairly inexpensive. Just thought I'd try them out, and the quality looks excellent. And I say looks excellent. Ultimately, time will tell when you actually go to use it. Next up is a silly item. I love all kinds of measuring equipment. You know, if I need something that's particularly accurate, I go to my Fluke. It's reliable and it's incredibly accurate. Although I gotta say, their battery replacement is crap on this old 87. You gotta take the whole case card, you gotta pop this off, you gotta take this apart, and if you leave for any period of time with the battery inside, it's gonna leak, so I don't leave a battery in it. All that just ends up, you know, being annoying. In any case, the display is readable on that one, but this was 20 bucks, and I thought, you know, with my failing vision, I'm just kind of curious to see how decent this is, because this thing is all display. It doesn't appear to have come with batteries. It did come with 2 sets of moderately decent probes, obviously not Flukes, but they look pretty decent. They feel solid, and a temperature probe, which, you know, not bad. It's got this really heavy plastic overmold that makes the switches not terribly tactile. And I don't think, oh, and it sticks too. I don't think it came with batteries. It takes 2 AAA, so I need to go get a couple of those because it doesn't want to power on. So let me grab a couple and bring you right back. All right, so after I took this overmold off, which in a word is kind of gross because it's very stiff, the plastic is really chintzy, really thin, and not glass fiber reinforced. So, but you know, 20 bucks. I sort of knew that when I was going in. You sort of always just sort of go for it, right? Lost that non-captive screw. It is on the ground somewhere. All right, so let's take a look at some features of this meter in operation. So when you power it on, when it's cold, this plastic is really stiff, and this is really cold right now. It defaults in the auto mode, and in the auto mode, it'll measure resistance automatically, or if you plug this guy into an AC outlet like so, it will measure AC voltage. Now it's so bright here you can't see it, but maybe you can if I turn an angle. You can see the backlights on. It's actually got a red light on warning you that it's dangerous voltage, which is kind of nice. If you pop it on a battery, it'll measure DC voltage straight up. I don't know if I have a battery handy. Oh, here we go. So you pop it on a battery, it'll switch to DC voltage like so, 9.1 volts. If you flip it around and get the polarity wrong, it'll automatically correct and put a negative in front of it. So that'll work fine. Now here's something that even says in the manual that's a rub. If the voltage is below 0.5 volt, this will default to resistance and you can't force it over. So if you're reading a battery that's less than 0.5 volt, it's going to show in ohms instead, and what it's doing is putting a forward bias continuously on these probes unless there's some other voltage coming in which it shuts it off, and their threshold is 0.5 volt, and there's no way to put it on manual like a lot of meters that have auto. So You cannot measure DC under half a volt on this meter at all. Some of the other scales, it has a built-in temperature measuring device. It also comes with a thermocouple. And right now it's in resistance for the thermocouple. And if I switch modes here, there's a diode test mode and there's a forced ohms mode. There's capacitance mode. And when this is the live mode, I'll show you that in 1 second. Let me cycle through temperature. So here we are on temperature Celsius. And rather than just have a separate button to switch between Celsius and Fahrenheit, they have a separate screen, if I can push the button, that's Fahrenheit. And it goes with as high as 2000 or so Fahrenheit. And if I find myself a heat source here, and pop this in there, you can see it reads all the way up there. It went too high. I went over 2000, but there's 1700. There's 1400. And that's too hot, too high for it. But so it reads reasonably well. It's a pretty slow moving thermocouple. Doesn't have a lot of thermal mass, so I'm not quite sure why it's so slow. But like when you get your hand on it, I guess that was actually pretty reasonably fast. I had my hand on it earlier. You know, you figure your hand would be like, you know, in the 90s, right? Somewhere around 90 or 80s. It crept up very slowly. It stayed in the 60s, so not, maybe it doesn't do as well at the lower temperatures, but it does reasonably well at high temperatures. That was pretty impressive, actually. Yeah, see, I've got my hands held on it pretty tightly here. Anyways. Not my primary temperature measuring device, but it's nice and it comes with a thermocouple. Let's show you a couple other features of this guy that are kind of interesting. So in the live mode, it has the ability to detect AC. Let me grab a AC cord. Okay, so this AC cord's not connected to anything. And it does have the ability to do non-contact voltage measurement. I bought two of these, one for a guy at work that also wanted one, and his is more sensitive than mine. Mine, it is very hard to get to read this non-contact voltage. As you can see, I'm struggling with it. If I take the case off, which in cold temperature, this case is really stiff, you have a little bit better luck, although not great with this particular AC cord. I had tried some other ones at work and it was a little better, but I wouldn't want to bet my life on it. But here's another feature of this guy. If you take a single probe, like just the plus probe here, plug it in and actually touch it to AC, it will tell you. So with one probe, without creating a complete circuit, you can go and probe like a breaker panel and just go by breaker to breaker to see which ones are hot. So it does work really well that way, and that's pretty reliable. What isn't reliable, unfortunately, boy, the buttons are so much easier with this off, is detecting this non-contact voltage bit. I think I just got a bum one, and for 20 bucks, I guess they're not being overly careful with their quality control. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this meter. It's got some definite limitations. If you just want a quickie meter for like throwing in the car, which is what I got this for, it's adequate. You got to know its limitations, that it can't measure under half a volt. You probably won't be doing that anyways, but if you are, it's not going to work. The plastic bezel is some very soft plastic. My fingernail scratches it. So it's not even polycarbonate, I don't think. Anyways, I think it's still a pretty decent value for the money. I mean, it was, after all, only 20 bucks. 23, 24. Oh, it's got an LED too, which is not very bright at all. But in the car, it could be really handy at night. I'll show you the LED. It's sort of pointless. It's almost pointless, right? So you push and hold the second button up here. It gives you a backlight on the display, which it's so bright where I'm shooting here that you can probably hardly see it, and the LEDs on, but it's not very bright. And that's it. I think it's okay for the money, but if you're looking for a primary meter, I wouldn't choose this. Next up is something I got on a total whim because I'd never seen anything like this before. And I only bought it because it's a novelty and it was dirt cheap on eBay. I only bid 10 bucks for it and got it. They're very, very unusual, but makes sense when you see it. It is a wet film thickness gauge. So they come in 3 different scales here. 4 through 18 mils or thousandths of an inch, 6 through 30, and 5 through 40 thousandths. And the way, these are brand new, although, you know, I guess maybe they are ground after they're stamped. They sort of look like they're mostly stamped. They were inexpensive and I've never seen anything like it. So what you do with this to measure the film thickness is you take your wet film, or you go over to your wet film in a spot where something's not going to get ruined. And you take and put this flat up against it, and where the liquid leaves a mark tells you the thickness, so or that it's just greater than that thickness. So if you have a range, you can find one that doesn't get the film thickness. The film doesn't show up on it, but the next one does. That says it's between 12 and 14 mil or thousandths of an inch. So you can see how they work here. Yeah, they sort of looked. I'm looking at this. I think it's just stamped. I don't think it's actually machined. I think they just stamp these things, which means these gauges probably are not terribly accurate. But they're interesting. I'd never seen anything like that before, so I bought it so that we could all see. And now you have. All right, moving on. Next up is a used item that I bought for curiosity's sake, as many of the things I buy do. I don't necessarily always need to have an absolute use for one. If the price is low enough and I can afford it, then and my wife is willing to go along with it, which she seems to always be, I buy things just to satisfy my curiosity sometimes. Sometimes I resell them, sometimes I just keep them because I think they're beautiful. This guy is a custom gauge made for a company, looks like to measure some sort of depth on the top of a cylinder very precisely, because this gauge reads in 50 millionths, and it's a CEJ gauge, and that's what attracted me to it. It's the Johansson Gauge Company, the people that invented the original gauge blocks, along with for Henry Ford. What's interesting about this kind of gauge is, the normal kind of gauge, like this guy over here, the normal dial gauge that we have all over the place. The normal dial gauges, the way they work is they're a rack and pinion. So along the shaft are teeth up in here, and you've probably seen people take these apart before, and it rotates a gear, which rotates a bunch of other gears to get their proper ratio so that you can read it out on the display. This style works very differently, and I haven't taken one apart, and I'm not sure that I should because I've never done it. I might just do it. I'll have to think about that one and do it again at some point in the future. But my understanding about this type of gauge is that it works based on torsion, and they have essentially the needle sitting between a twisted wire, and when this pushes up, it rotates that twisted wire, the end of the twisted wire, which puts torque on this guy to make it move. And you can see how incredibly sensitive that is. And that's how it gets the incredible magnification of motion. It's pretty amazing. Also, I've never seen this done before. So almost every one of these indicators like this have these little sliding marks if you want to put a range, of measurement. Like if you're setting this up to test an industrial setting, you want to go between a range. So they got these little sliding things. This one did it with a spring along the outside. That's very creative. I've never seen one like that. So you can set your range like that. Kind of a beautiful, beautiful made device. And the test assembly, I have no idea what it came with. I didn't buy it for that. That really wasn't relevant. I wanted it for the indicator because I didn't have any of this style indicator, and it's pretty fantastic. Strangely enough, I was bidding on 2 of them, didn't expect to win either, won both. So I also got this one, which is a rip-off of the original Johansson one. And this one works by the same torsion mechanism, but it's made in Russia, and this is 1 micron sensitivity. And you've got to release. This one's got a safety on it, just like that one that has. And you can see how incredibly sensitive that needle is. This is the Russian copy. This is brand new, and it was only $100, being shipped from, not from Russia though. I forgot where I got it from, like Bulgaria. It took a long time to get here, but I'm pretty excited to have it. So these are kind of neat. Hopefully at some point in the future I'll get the guts to take one of these apart and see how the mechanism works, but I really don't want to damage it because these are beautiful instruments and worthy of protection.